Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rick Stevens.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here and to stoke your travel dreams. That's a beautiful anecdote, a beautiful example of what good travel is all about. And I'd like to spend 90 minutes, the next 90 minutes, sharing with you what I think are the most important lessons I've learned from 30 years of traveling. I've spent, I think, a third of my adult life, 4 months a year for the last 30 years, living out of a 9 by 22 by 14 inch carry-on airplane sized suitcase. Hanging out with people who see different truths to be self-evident and God-given. And it's just been time and money wonderfully spent. As John said, I started out going to Europe with my parents because they were importing pianos in Germany, and I'd go up and see the piano factories in Germany and see relatives up in Norway. And after a few trips, I remember I was in the train station in Copenhagen, and I saw kids a couple of years older than me with their rucksacks and their Eurail passes and exciting destinations clicking up on the reader board, and I just thought, boy, Europe is their playground. They're as free as the wind. And I looked at my mom and dad and I thought, I don't need you guys for this. Europe is my playground too. And I vowed to go back to Europe every year since then. And I have. Back in the old days, I was just traveling for fun. I was a piano teacher, kids wouldn't practice in the summer, I'll see you in September. And as I traveled, I realized a lot of people were making the same mistakes that I was making and learning from the year before. And I thought if I could just package the lessons I've learned from my mistakes into a talk or a guidebook or something, other people could learn from my mistakes rather than learn how to have a better trip, and I would have a good excuse to go back to Europe every year and update my material. So that's what I do. I go over there, make all the mistakes I can, take careful notes. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and come home and tell about everybody about it. And I'm doing the same thing now that I was doing back as a student at the University of Washington and Experimental College, only now I've got a staff of 100 people up in Edmonds helping me, and I've got technology beyond my wildest dreams to amplify our teaching. Just today I was down at KCTS doing some voiceover work for some travel specials that will be airing all over the country. It's so much fun to go over there, and I see Europe as the wading pool for world exploration. My favorite country is India. But I think my main thing is just to get people to take a step beyond Orlando. I mean, Orlando's fine 4 or 5 times, but after that, consider Portugal. It's no more expensive, it's no more risky, and to me, it's much more challenging and stimulating to get out of our comfort zone and to broaden our perspectives. I just think that's really great. A lot of people are afraid to travel these days. Have you noticed how much fear there is in our society? And I've thought a lot about that. And to me, it's, well, first of all, if people are making us fearful, I think they've got an agenda. And I just think out of respect to our own freedom, we should put our foot down and say, I'm not going to be afraid just because you want me to be afraid. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The most frightened people are the people who don't get out. Think about that. They let the TV wire their whole worldview. And they'll freak out at things they shouldn't freak out about. I think the flip side of fear is understanding, and we can't look bad, could do that quite easily. And we're doing just the flip side, and most of us don't realize it. When my daughter did her high school graduation trip, she did the basic Eurail thing and everything, and she actually asked me for some advice, which I thought was remarkable. And I recommended that she do the whole Eurail thing with all the predictable stuff, and then spend a week in Prague and a week in Istanbul, and then fly home. I wanted her to have a week in a former communist Slavic capital, and I wanted her to have a week in a Muslim secular capital, a modern Islamic city. And she loved her week in Prague and her week in Istanbul. Since before the first Gulf War, we've been taking tour groups to Turkey without a hitch. It's the one tour that we offer of our 35 different itineraries that I think really changes people. And I just can't get enough of taking people to Turkey for 2 weeks. It's an amazing story. It's just an amazing place. It's cheap, it's friendly, it's tasty, it's safe, and it's struggling. It's not in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. This is reality travel to go to Turkey. I'll never forget some of the fun I had as a tour guide taking our groups around Turkey. By the way, for 25 years I was leading our tours. For the last 10 years I've just been taking our tours instead of leading them. I sign up for a tour every year. I get a discount. And I sign up with a pseudonym, and then I just surprise the group over there. It's really fun, but every year I pick a different tour to go on. But this was our best year ever with our tour program. We took 700 groups around on 30 different itineraries, about 19,000 people we took on our tours this year. Of those 19,000 people that took our tours this year, more than half of them were return customers. For the right people, these tours are just really great. For the wrong people, they are a hellish vacation. So you gotta read what it's like. But they're very experiential, and I just thoroughly enjoy taking the tours each year. But we have a good time taking our groups to Istanbul for 1 week, or the best of Turkey for 2 weeks. But Istanbul is an amazing city. Look at this thing. I mean, it's a city of 15 million people, something like that. For 400 years, it was the most important city in Christendom, the leading city in the Christian world. This is where East meets West. And just in the last couple of years, this is the tiny Golden Horn here, this body of water, but over here is a big strait, like the Puget Sound kind of, that separates Asia from Europe. And I know Seattle's trying to build a tunnel right now from 3rd Avenue to 10th Avenue. In Turkey, they just built a tunnel from Asia to Europe. And there's trains now taking 1 million people commuting in and out of the city from the Asian side. I don't know how everybody's able to build tunnels except us. There must be a reason, I really don't know. But I'm impressed by just the energy of going to Istanbul. By the way, when you go to Istanbul, you can see here the cruise ships. You see, I was on that cruise ship, and you'd think cruising is the opposite of my kind of travel, and it kind of is, but the reality is cruising is cheap. It's easy, you see a lot of different things in successive days, and it's very efficient. It's cheating, kind of, because you're not having to make any decisions. You just step off the boat every day and you're just in a different country. But I like it for what it is. On a cruise ship, there's about 3,000 tourists. Now, by my estimate, 1,000 of them are not even travelers. They're just looking for a floating Las Vegas, all right? 1,000 of them are very lazy tourists that don't know much of anything that's going on, but they just want to check things off and see the Leaning Tower and see the Beefeaters and see the Vatican or whatever. And 1,000 of those 3,000 are actual travelers that just want to move into one hotel room. They've got their information, and as soon as that gangplank hits the dock, they're off and on their own. And they have 8 or 10 hours in that town, and then they get back onto the ship, and they toggle back into their resort mode, and then they're enjoying the music and the pool and the nice buffet. And then they sail at night, and the next morning they do the same thing. It's not a bad thing. I've taken a lot of tours recently because I've written guidebooks for cruisers in the Mediterranean and Northern Europe, and it's an interesting option. But the cool thing for me was I was having breakfast on the top of the ship at 8 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, I was on the top of this hill on this street, immersed in Turkey, without a single person from my cruise anywhere nearby. The point is, you could be on a cruise, and you can get there effortlessly, and half an hour off the boat, you can be immersed in that city as if you're not on a cruise. And that is a good option. One of my favorite things to do anywhere in Europe is to walk down Iskandar Kadase and spend 3 hours just strolling down this street. It is an amazing opportunity. Something you've got to decide early on is, are you going to take a tour, or are you going to go on your own? And, there's a lot of good reasons to take tours, but the most common reason people haven't taken a tour is, I think the worst reason, they don't think they can do it on their own. Anybody smart enough to find this room tonight by 6 o'clock has what it takes to be able to do a tour without being spoon-fed by a guide. All you got to do is equip yourself with a guidebook and expect yourself to travel smart you can. It's certainly not rocket science. But I got to admit, there's a lot of efficiency and economy built into organized travel. And if you want to let somebody else do the driving, and if you want to know that these activities all lined up for you, and if you don't mind just limiting yourself to that itinerary that the tour offers, it can be very economic. On our tours, a lot of people ask us, this is one of our tours, they ask me, how do you make any money on this? Because they look at the price and they know how much it costs on your own. And it's clear to me, I make money on my tours by talking 25 people into sharing one vehicle. instead of getting 25 cars or 25 train passes. Right there, there's more than enough money to keep me really happy. And if everything else is just a wash, it can be a very good value for the travelers too. Do you follow me? If the eating, sleeping, entertainment, sightseeing, guided tours, all of that stuff costs the same either way, and people, instead of doing their own driving, are letting the bus driver do the driving, and they're in a bus with 25 other people, and I'm just capitalizing on the efficiency and sharing the ride, it's a win-win situation. So that's my passion on tour organizing, and that's why I feel really good about the business. And my challenge is to make it the most valuable and experiential kind of vacation possible. And that's what we do at Europe to the Back Door. Our tours are different than most because there's half as many people on the bus, 25 instead of 50. And our guides are the best paid guides in Europe, paid up front, rather than not paid or paid a token wage and encouraged to make money off of the group by taking them shopping, selling them sightseeing, and angling for tips. I just don't like that business plan. I think you should pay a little more up front and have the guide on your side. When all the dust settles, it costs about the same either way, but you have a guide who's actually on your side and it's more respectful for everybody involved. Remember, the standard operating procedure for guides in Europe is not to make but a token wage, and they get 20% on all the group shopping as a kickback. They park you outside of town so there's nothing to do but take the optional tour into town, and that's how they kind of pad their bottom line. And of course, they've got this tip situation. One thing I can't advertise, but I just feel very strongly about is just the great people that sign up on our tours. I just love the kind of people that join us, and I thoroughly just look forward to getting to know a couple dozen people on my vacation when I take these tours each year. I want to talk, and if you want more information on our tour program, outside there was a newsletter, that the big one, it has a DVD in it. It's a very candid and straightforward look at what our tours are like, and you're welcome to browse through that and see what it looks like, or go to our website and learn more about that. I want to talk constructively about the normal mainstream and possibly cheap tours, the ones that have the guide that's paid a token wage, that park you outside of town so you have to pay to get into town, the ones that go to the diamond polishing instead of the Van Gogh. These can be a very good value if all you do is think of it as a bus pass that comes with forgettable, comfortable American-style hotels. Seriously, it's the cheapest way to travel. You'll spend less for that tour per day than you would for the hotels that you do around Europe. So you're going to get transportation and hotels and some guiding for less than the cost you'd pay on hotels on your own. So your challenge is to find an itinerary that you like and then take the tour. They're not making any money off of you. Equip yourself with a guidebook and think of it as a bus pass that comes with hotels, and do your own thing all day long. Even if lunch is included, skip it. Because it just wastes time. And you've got 12 hours to do whatever you want in Munich, and you've got a guidebook and you can do a lot. Just be back at the hotel before the bus takes off the next morning, you see. So you've got that opportunity to freeload on these impossibly cheap tours, and nobody thinks of it like that, but if you do, you are really taking it's a beautiful thing. If everybody did that, they'd have to start charging more for their tours, but of course, you know what it's like. They just got to get people on board because they'll make money off you once you're on board if you're the standard kind of tourist. I know that because I just know how the tour industry works. I mean, these people they're in Morocco here. This is the one meal in their life that these Americans have in Africa, and they're eating it with people from New Jersey, California, and Texas, right there. And it's just, I visit this restaurant because all the day trippers from Costa del Sol timeshare condos come to Morocco for the day on the 1-hour boat ride from Gibraltar. They do the same stuff, and they eat lunch at the same place, and it just, to me, it's a shame. It's just a lame experience. Now, granted, you get a Boy George belly dancer, which is kind of fun, but it has nothing to do with Moroccan culture. It's just colorful and a photo op. You really, when you're going to go on your own, you've got to assert yourself. And too many people get on buses, and here's them on day 2, we could have done this on our own. So you do have the option of doing it on your own. And when you do it on your own, your challenge then is to get to these places that never see the tour groups. Put yourself 20 miles from the next tourist in Greece, staying in a little village that has no hotels and no postcards. No hotels, yeah. You know the local word for bed and breakfast, domatia. Domatia, you're staying in somebody's home. Every town's got bed and breakfast in Greece. It's $40 a night for a double. You're upstairs above the taverna. You've learned how to play backgammon. You're developing a taste for Rocky. You're flexible enough to hang out tomorrow because there's a wedding festival and you're a guest of honor. It's just a lot of fun, and anybody can do this. So that's the kind of stuff we talk about in our program. If you want more information on this, our website is such a resource. I'm so proud of it. We've got 9 years of radio hours right there in an archive. We've been doing these radio shows every Saturday at 2 o'clock for 9 years now on KUW. I get to talk to experts about hunting truffles in Piedmont. I get to talk to soccer hooligans. I get to talk to the princess of Norway. I've always wanted to talk to royalty in the 21st century. I got to ask her, do you still marry your cousins, and are you all just a little bit off? And I get to talk to so many interesting people, and then all those interviews are carefully crafted and put on the radio show, and they're available. You can just listen to them on our website anytime. We've got 100 TV shows on our website. If you're going to Ireland, there's 4 shows right now. You can just click on your computer and watch them all. It's free. A lot of information on the website. The guidebooks are designed so you can do our tours without us. That's how the guidebooks originated, was as handbooks for the tours. And then I realized, a lot of people want to do the tour without us. So the guidebook gives you everything we know about doing that area. Museums can ruin a good vacation. And I know people are good for about two hours in a museum. And I don't care how great the museum is, I don't care how many wonderful pieces of art, you've got to tailor it down to a couple of hours and then make it meaningful. And that's what we like to do. I've got this app, which is absolutely free, and you just download this app. It's called Rick Steves Audio Europe, and it comes with 40 or 50 audio tours. And these will save you $50 each. And again, they're perfectly free. You download it, you can listen to it offline, and then you've got all the tours for all the great walks and museums in Paris, London, Venice, Florence, Rome, and so on. Here I am, I listen to my own tours a lot, so I get used to my own voice in my ears. But you're sitting on the boat going down the Grand Canal in Venice, and it's timed for each one of the docks. So you just get on at the train station, and this is what I used to do as a kid, taking my groups around Europe back in my backpacker days. I would commandeer one of these boats, my whole group would sit in the front, and I'd bark out the tour where all the palaces are as we floated by. Now it's much more convenient, you can do it on your own anytime you like, and you just got that tour there. So I hope that you can take advantage of that. That helps and it works well for a lot of people. Also on our Facebook page, I just enjoy taking people behind the scenes and let them know what's going on in each of these things that we're doing with our teaching. The Europe 101 book is History and Art for Travelers. I just gave this talk in 3 hours, and it is free, and it'll be showing up on our website in a few weeks. But there's lots of information about enjoying the history and the art, and the radio show, as I mentioned, is also another resource where people can learn more about what they're seeing. No matter how enthusiastic you are about the internet, I think it's important for you to use the internet while you're traveling. This is how you find out what the weather's like on top of the mountain before you buy a ticket to get up there. You confirm that the restaurant is open before going across town. You realize that you can fly cheaper than you could take the bus to get from Edinburgh back to London. So many ways that with the internet you can travel smartly. And you can get online very easily these days. As a matter of fact, I bring my laptop and I bring my iPhone. If you've got a mobile device, you can roam, and it's quite expensive. I just went up to Vancouver last week and I left it on and I ran up like a $500 bill. I had to call him up and say, I didn't tell him I was a travel guru. And I said, I don't know how to use this thing, but somehow I just left it on and it cost me $500. Turn it into airplane mode. Disable it as a phone. Use it as a computer. And you can get online free. You can Skype your friends at home. You can check your email. You can, put your photos on Facebook, whatever. This is such a handy thing as a computer. A lot of people really like their iPads. A mini iPad is a beautiful tool in Europe. And remember, the main thing is you can get online almost anywhere these days, and generally for free, if you know how to. So you've got that connectivity, and I think it's really an important tool. Tourist information offices need to be your first stop in town. Even if you know the town really well, this is where you pick up a map, you find out where can I rent a bike, what time are the fountains going on tomorrow, what's happening tonight. All of this information at the Tourist Information Office. They used to be honest information services. Over time, they've had to earn a profit and pay for their rent. So now they are ad agencies, and you've got to remember that. And you're not going to get the consumer information, you're going to have to ask for it. They've got the stuff that pays to be on the shelf first. In spite of that, it's still a good resource as we travel. And you can still learn a lot about every place you're going if you just go there, pick up the brochures, get organized. You've got a chance to buy these passes to the city, museum passes. A great thing about a museum pass is, for the cost of 3 entries, it pays for itself. Let's say you're going to get a 48-hour pass. You probably have to go to 4 museums and you break even. But the cool thing about it is you can pop into anybody's little museum for free, which you probably wouldn't want to pay for otherwise, because you're just going to spend 20 minutes in there and it's raining and you want to check it out. Also, you never have to wait in a line. I'll talk about this more later, but the lines in Europe are not lines to get in. They're lines to buy a ticket to get in. And if you've got that museum pass, you walk right by those people. You go straight to the turnstile and in. And that in itself justifies the purchase of those museum passes. One of my favorite things to do in Europe is to take local guided walks. This is my delight. Nowadays, my favorite splurge is I hire guides wherever I go. I spend 4 months a year in Europe. I've been there for 30 years. I spend April and May in the Mediterranean. I go home in June, and then I'm in north of the Alps in July and August. And in my schedule, almost every day, I've got 2 local guides. I like to pick different brains. I've got one guide at 10 o'clock until 2 o'clock, and one guide at 6 o'clock until 10 o'clock at night. It works for my research, and it's a little bit expensive. It's a couple $100 for a guide for a half a day. But with my work, it really helps me be 5 times as productive as I'd be otherwise. But with you and your travel partners, if you can afford it, and if you get a couple of couples together, think about private guides. And remember, the private guide becomes more valuable where they cost less. You wouldn't want to hire a private guide in London. You don't need one there. They're the most expensive anywhere. But when you're in St. Petersburg, or Prague, or Morocco, or Turkey, that's where the guides are cheap. They're young, university-educated people, oftentimes with their own car, and they make all the difference in the world. Leap for the luxury of having a private guide. I would just jump ship in St. Petersburg on our cruise up there. I didn't want to take the whole overnight cruise back to the starting point, Copenhagen. I just thought, I'm going to spend 5 extra days in St. Petersburg. So I was the only person out of 3,000 that left the ship. And for 5 days, I had 4 different guides in St. Petersburg. Each one was a personality. Each one was a pro. Each one was very affordable. And I had a rich experience in the most wonderful city in Russia. In fact, that's one of my Russian guides right there. And she drove us around, and she had her iPad as a teaching tool, and it's just a beautiful thing. This is Hans Christian Andersen. Actually, Richard Cartman, who dresses up like Hans Christian Andersen in Copenhagen and gives Hans Christian Andersen walks every day. And, there's these kind of fun guides as you travel. I want to stress the importance of packing light. You don't have a mule. If you do, you're abusing your spouse. You need to be mobile, okay? And that just means don't take extra stuff. You see these people in here with so much junk, and you look at them and think, how does anybody need that much stuff? You need to be mobile. I live out of a bag this size for 4 months a year. I've done it all my life. We took 19,000 people on our tours this year. This looks like one of our tour reunions right here. Decent people, adults. None of these people were allowed to check anything on the airplane when they started the tour. 9 by 22 by 14 inches was the maximum we allow on our tours. Now, for a lot of people, that's a radical concept. What? 9 by 22 by 14? That was my cosmetics kit. No, that's everything. And it's a blessing. This is tough love, but I've bullied people into this, and I dropped in a week into their trip, and I checked in with them. They're always thankful. 2 weeks, 2 months, man, woman, winter, summer, there's no excuse. You need to be mobile. You need to limit it to that much luggage. You're on vacation. You don't need that much more stuff. A lot of Americans have this problem of being prepared for the worst scenario. That's baloney. Be prepared for the best scenario. That's probably good enough. And if it's not, you got a good excuse to go into some store in Bulgaria and shop around and pick up something you think might be toothpaste. Right? They've got your stuff over there. They really do. And it's fun to have to go shopping once in a while. I showed this slide. This is us just leaving. It's one of our tour groups. It's one of the tour groups that I signed up with. And this is our guide, Lisa. And she's a good traveler. And everybody on our tour here is mobile. If your tour is any good, you won't be able to park the bus right in front of your hotel. It should be in the middle of the traffic-free center, you know. And you got to walk with your gear. It's got to be. Now, the day will come when I'll have a wheeled bag. I got no problem with wheeled bags. As long as I'm strong enough to hang it on my back, I'm going to prefer that. But the wheeled bag is brilliant, and it's the same dimensions. But whether, you know, one way or another, you're going to be going a lot of places with your bags. When I check on and off of a cruise ship, I save hours by not having to check my bag. It's a wonderful thing. I got my bag with me right away. I'm the first guy off the ship. I don't have to wait for my bag. Many, many times, I'm able to flex and dance around problems in an airport because I've got my bag with me. 2 times in 1 month, my plane was canceled in Frankfurt because of thunderstorms. With global warming now, it's thunderstorms in the afternoon in Europe. And it's routine for you have tight connections and so on. And if your bag is on some plane that didn't make it or whatever, and you can hop on another plane, it just messes you up unless you got your bag with you. So if you can swing it, you'll be thankful to be able to take your gear with you with the wheels and be mobile. And it just means packing light. Exactly what is in your bag is beyond the scope of this class, but there's a woman in my staff, and a woman has much more credibility on packing issues than I do, you know. And she gives a 1-hour talk on packing light. And you can watch it at ricksteves.com for free. And she's brilliant. And she's talking to exactly your concerns about packing light and so on. So if you want to check in with that, all of these talks are available for free on our website. You can check that out. It's getting hot in Europe. I know that in the United States, we've just chosen to ignore climate change for another 2 years, I guess. It's just, you know, frankly, it's just selfish. It's just selfish because we're not going to have to pay the price. Our kids are going to have to pay the price, but it's getting hot. You know, I was just in the Netherlands. They're not dummies. The Netherlands are famously frugal. They're spending billions of dollars raising their dikes right now. We filmed it. They're building storm surge barriers as big as 2 Eiffel Towers on their side that slide in and stop the storm surge and then slide out when the coast is clear. That's what we need now for New Orleans, and we need it for New York. But we don't have the honesty and the fortitude to do it in our society. Europe is investing in it. In Europe, you don't build a ski lift anymore without plumbing it to make snow. You know, in Spain, the bullfights are later than they've ever been. They've changed the traditional hour of the bullfights because it's too hot at the standard time. It's hot over there. I could go on and on of all the actual examples of how Europeans are having to live with the change brought on by this changing climate. But I don't know my Celsius very well at all. I like Fahrenheit. But I do know that 28 is the same as 82. Right? So just that's all you got to remember for me. 28 is 82. And being from Seattle, anything over 28 is really hot. Right? And if everything's in the 30s, I'm pretty miserable. And this is just typical of France these days. Everything's in the 30s. So it's hot over there. For many years, out of solidarity for the people who have to live in the squalor of the tropics, I never used air conditioning, and I gave up on that. You can't sleep in Europe in the summer without air conditioning. And all the hotels have air conditioning, basically, now. But I really like traveling in the spring or the fall when I'm traveling in the Mediterranean. It's really important to bundle up, go in the spring or the fall. A lot of people wonder, especially retired travelers and so on, can we really do this? The most grueling thing physically about travel is the heat and the crowds of summer. Right? Go in the spring, go in the fall, bundle up. It's hot and it's crowded in the summer, and that's really no fun if you can avoid it. The language barrier, I don't know who's keeping time here, and I can go forever, so if somebody wants to give me a 10-minute warning, let me know, and then I can just turn my slides into movies, okay? But I'll just The language barrier is, has no business keeping you at home. Now, I speak only English, nothing to brag about, but I make that really clear, because if I spoke all the languages and said you can do it, it's easy, that would make no sense. I'm just like most of you. I speak English and that's about it, all right? Remember, we speak the world's linguistic common denominator. Think about it. If a Greek meets a Norwegian hiking in the Alps, how do they communicate? They communicate, but they don't communicate in Greek or Norwegian. What Greek speaks Norwegian? They communicate in broken English. Common sense. I was just in Palestine. The signs are in 2 languages. Hebrew, or 3 languages. Hebrew, Arabic, and English for everybody else, all right? English is always there. I was just in the Copenhagen airport, and in that case, the signs are only in English, not even in Danish. English is the international language. Now, the signs are multilingual. There's 5 different ways to say sugar, and English always makes it. You need to make educated guesses. Okay, if you're not feeling well in Denmark, can you see a sign with a red cross on it pointing to the Central Sick House? You kind of got to say it, Central Sick House. Well, go down and get fixed up. It's impressive to me how many travelers with bleeding death in the street corner looking for the word hospital. They've got these things. If there's 2 thieves in town, you're going to meet them. It's not that Europe is a very dangerous place from a theft point of view, it's just that the thieves that are there target Americans, not because they're mean, but because they're smart. It's just common sense. If I was a street thief in Europe, I'd specialize in Americans. I'd have a little card that says, Yanks or us. Now, they're not going to mug you or knife you. That only happens here. It's just sport. They're going to grab your purse or your wallet. So just be smart and button things in and wear a money belt and so on. And we do remember that the beggars are actually thieves. You've got to assume, she says, you know, it's a sad situation. She's a beautiful lady, big, beautiful eyes, adorable children. She says she wants €1. She really wants your wallet. Okay? And just be on guard, because they're very clever and they're very fast. The euro is great news. 300 million people have the same coins jangling in their pockets these days. I love it. When I cross the border, I don't even think about changing money anymore. And I do want to remind you that we've got this crisis going on. Everybody talks about how tough the economies are. And in Europe, you'll find a lot of demonstrations. First of all, 90% of humanity wishes they had our crisis. Half of humanity is trying to live on $2 a day. Whenever you hear Americans moping about how tough economic times are here, remember, we are already filthy rich, and we've been growing every year as an economy through our crisis. I don't want to belittle anybody's personal problems if they're out of work or their business went out. That's a major problem. But as a society, we're already great and we're always growing, you see. If there's a crisis, it's a crisis of distribution within our beautiful system, but we can't really talk about that. Now in Europe, they've got another crisis, and their crisis is they used to have a young society, and now it's a geriatric society. Europe has entitlements that make ours look stingy. And that was smart, and that was sustainable, and that was very effective, as long as you had a young society with a lot of workers and not many retired people, a pyramid-shaped society. Now, the mark of smart entitlements is you have a successful society, and when that happens, you get better educated, and you get more money. When you're rich and smart, 2 things happen. You live longer, and you have fewer children. That's just like an equation. That's just the way it is. When a society's rich and smart, they live longer and they have fewer children. So Europe has morphed from this economy, or this demographic, to the upside down. Not many young people working, a lot of people living to retirement, and those who live to retirement live just way too long after that. And, I mean, that's a beautiful thing, of course. But what it means is that you cannot sustain your entitlements assuming there's a lot of young people and not many old people, right? So the unfortunate lot in life for politicians in Europe is to stand in front of their workers and say, sorry, we're going to change the rules on it. You spend your life for the promise, your mom and dad got it, your friend retired 5 years ago, she got it, you got to work 8 more years. That's enough to make good people go downtown and burn a Starbucks. And that's what happens in Europe. And these people are marching. It's a healthy thing. That's how Europeans bent. And workers are upset because they're changing the rules and they march. In the United States, we got the same kind of frustrations, but all that marching is just way too much exercise. So we vent, but by venting, we go home and find a TV station that affirms our frustrations, and then we just shake our hands and it's all good. It's the same kind of venting that's going on. Now, from a practical travel point of view, what you got to remember is, in Europe, there's no danger because there's demonstrations, and there's going to be demonstrations in Europe for the rest of our lives. It's a healthy thing. I've been caught up in many of these demonstrations, and you can avoid them very easily. There are demonstrations here because it's a free society, and that's the way they vent. I have changed my last traveler's checks, that's for sure. You use your ATM card and you get cash, local hard cash, and generally I like to use cash instead of my credit card. You'll hear people talking about the danger of a magnetic credit card, a magnetic strip, as opposed to the European chip card. Right? Now when you get a new credit card, a lot of times it's already going to have that chip in it instead of the magnetic strip. I only have the old-fashioned magnetic strip card, and once in a while it's an inconvenience, but frankly, don't worry about it. Because whenever you've got to do something important with your credit card, your magnetic strip works. It's filling up the gas tank at an automated machine, it's getting a Coke down the hall in your hotel, it's paying for parking with your credit card. That, you can't use that with your old-fashioned magnetic strip credit card. But getting a cash advance, paying for your hotel, any of that, you can do with your traditional cards. Europe is investing in its infrastructure like we have a hard time imagining. Did I just, okay. They're building new bridges, new tunnels, new bullet trains. It's more important than ever to get off the beaten path if you're going to smell the roses. I was just in the train station in Munich, 1,000 trains a day coming at right angles. I was just in France going across the country, 300 kilometers an hour, smooth, silent, air-tinted windows, and then bam, into Paris. Bullet trains are amazing. I was just in Munich taking pictures of trains coming into the station, specifically taking pictures of what were cute little birds squished onto the windshield of these trains. When I saw that sweet little bird squished onto the windshield, I thought two things. First of all, I thought, this is a dangerous continent if you're a slow bird. And then I thought, this is a surreal image. You'd wait all your life to see a bird squished to the windshield here in Seattle. I mean, I could imagine a bird sitting in a folding chair on the rooftop with a cigar and a drink. But I just took the train from Seattle to Portland, and the train actually stopped so that cargo could go by the people. I mean, cargo takes preference over people in the United States. You know, that's just, you know, you could think about that. But in Europe, that would not happen. Okay, I'm going to have to go quickly here. I'm sorry about that. Commit yourself to public transportation. Very exciting. I mean, public transportation is so good in Europe, a lot of people never get around to learning how to drive. It's not a political statement or an environmental thing. Why bother? They've got great public transportation. When I land at the airport in London, if I'm going to be in London for a week, depends on my mood, but if I'm in a good independent traveler, budget traveler mood, I buy my 1 week tube and bus pass at the airport, and for the cost of the taxi ride from the airport to my hotel, I will buy a 1 week all my transportation in London card. Do you follow me there? That takes a little more work to get to my hotel, but I get there essentially as fast. And for the rest of the week, I've got free transportation in the most expensive city here because I'm committed to public transportation. Think about that in your travels. It helps a lot. Don't be attracted to a big English language sign that says no frozen food on the most expensive square in the city. I mean, that's kind of common sense, but you want to leave the famous square and get to a low-rent square and find a place packed out with locals, not tourists, that has a small, handwritten menu in one language. It's small because it's cooking up whatever it can sell today. It's handwritten because it's changing according to what's fresh in the market this week. And it's in one language, the local language, because they're targeting local travel, local people who are return customers who recognize a good value rather than the tourists. If it's full of locals, if it's low rent, and if it's got that kind of a menu, it's a good restaurant. It's just going to be a winner, you see. And that's easy to recognize. There's lots of information on eating and so on that you can find in the different guidebooks on our website. There's so many fun ways to eat in a on-the-fly kind of way. The wonderful antipasto bars in Italy, the beautiful tapas in Spain. Government-subsidized mensas all over Europe. This is the City Hall in Oslo, where you can eat with the City Hall workers. And no matter how tight your budget is, you really need to splurge for a great meal in each country. Spend $50 or $60 for a wonderful meal, but order carefully. This is such a common sense tip, I almost hesitate to say it, but so many Americans, they go to an expensive restaurant and they all order the conventional everything in a row. When you could share dishes, you could each order first course, you could share the main course and share the dessert and have a carafe of house wine instead of a bottle of fine wine, and you've had the same beautiful service, the same wonderful ambiance, the same beautiful clientele all around you, you're eating quality food, and you're not walking out of there feeling like you just went broke and made a cow, Undereat instead of overeat. These days Europeans are thrilled you're there, and if there's 4 of you and you just buy one dessert and ask for 4 spoons, no problem at all. That's a very good budget tip. Wonderful markets where you can make a picnic. You can't spend much money picnicking, that's for sure, and it's always healthy. And then find an atmospheric place to enjoy it. As far as hotels go, I want to talk just for a second about hotels, and I'm not talking about this. When I was a kid, I used to stay in these, dumpy places. This is not Europe at all. This is $2 a night in a town in eastern Turkey where they just have hotels for shepherds. You can get non-government regulated flop houses in Europe where for $25 you get a bed and a kitten tossed in for no extra. And I'm not talking about that either, but ever since I was a backpacker, I've known that these kind of hotels, these glassy, high-rise American-style hotels are the ones that not only mess up your budget, they destroy what you went to Europe for. Think about it, the ultimate accomplishment for a hotel, and they brag about it, is to reach that intercontinental plateau. Intercontinental, it's the same everywhere. That's what they're saying. Designed for people who deep down inside wish they were not traveling. People who need a paper strap over the toilet promising them nobody has sat here yet. You can get transplanted American ices, but you're going to pay American prices plus shipping for them. I would rather stay in a funky local chalet. $150 a night, including breakfast, high in the Swiss Alps, in a little 2-star hotel on a pedestrian-only street in Paris, 7 blocks from the Eiffel Tower. So French, when you step outside in the morning, you feel like you must have had a poodle in a previous life. You're certainly not roughing it. There's an elevator, there's a private toilet and shower in the room, and so on. As a matter of fact, the old toilet down the hall is long gone. Everybody wants their private facilities, and now we pay an extra $30 a night to have our toilet and shower right there. A great way to enjoy double the cultural intimacy for half the price is to stay in a B&B. Every country's got it, you just got to know the local word. Husrum is Norwegian, for Chamberdote, which is French, for Zimmer, which is German, for Camera Affiti, which this woman would understand, it's Italian, for bed and breakfast. Added advantage of a bed and breakfast is you get your own temporary local mother. Who's really excited that you're there. I mean, this is Mrs. Farrell. She has a beautiful little B&B on the far west coast of Ireland where people stand on the bluff and they gaze out at the Atlantic and they say, the next parish over is Boston. And when I drop into her place, she's so excited that Ricky from Seattle is there. If you're traveling with a family, the more people you put into the room, the cheaper it gets. Youth hosteling is wide open for people of any age. This is the industrial strength kind of hostels you find in Europe these days. They took the word youth out of the hostel system, so now if you are alive, you are young enough to do that. And it's not only cheap, it's practical and it's fun because you're part of a circle of friends, you can cook for the price of groceries in the members' kitchen and so on. There's no age requirement for this kind of travel. You need to be in good shape as much as possible because Europe is designed in so many ways to be inaccessible. So, there are ways to travel in an accessible way. I would remind you, cruising is great if you're not a good walker because every stop has an option for people that don't walk well. The bus is waiting for you right there, and you can just enjoy without any extra demands on your walking. But the better you can walk, obviously, for Europe, it's going to be cute. Europe is crowded with people who live there, and it's crowded with all of us who hustle in every summer. If you're on the ball, you're not going to wait in lines. But a lot of people waste a lot of time in lines. There's 2 IQs of European travelers. Those who wait in lines and those who do not wait in lines. If you're waiting in line, you're messing up. My passion in my guidebook research is to find every line and find a way around it for my readers, okay? These people are not waiting to get into the Colosseum. They're waiting to buy a ticket to get into the Colosseum. And as I mentioned, there are ways to get around that problem. This is Versailles on Tuesday. Now, any guidebook recommends avoid Versailles on Tuesday. It's about the only thing in Paris that's open. Let's go out to Versailles. People realize when nothing else is open. Now, the guidebooks say, you know, avoid Versailles on Tuesday. People don't get around to reading their guidebook until they're right about here. And there's nothing else to do. Your trip's important. I was recently halfway up the Eiffel Tower analyzing a line situation. I had just arrived and I used my guidebook and I made a reservation in advance and I had to go through this little thing and then I had to walk through all these empty stanchions. I got to the front and they took me right to the elevator and I went straight up because I made a reservation. Anybody could do it, it's almost free. I enjoyed the Eiffel Tower and was down before some of these people got to the elevator. After I got out of the Eiffel Tower, I walked this entire line really slow and I looked at each person. Now, one of them had the Rick Steves Paris guidebook. And you complement your how to navigate the crowd situation with going to places that never have crowds, where you become the big news. And then when you see four cute guys sitting on a bench, ask them to scoot over. I've been saying this for 25 years, and it works great. This is one of the quintessential things to do in Europe, is to enjoy the world going by from the bench with those guys. Hey, I've had so much fun making our TV shows over the last 20 years, and I'm really excited right this season because we've got 7 hours of new programming just hitting the airways this month. 12 new shows and our 1 hour special on the Holy Land. I hope that you can enjoy some of that. It's coming up on Channel 9. I'm really thankful for our crew and the hard work that they do and to be a part of public television. I mentioned our tour program. It's the hottest thing in our program at Europe Through the Back Door. This is our best year ever, and we're selling at about a 20% clip above that for next year. If you're curious about our tours, you know how to get more information on that. As I said, I take our tours every year, and it's just fun for me to enjoy them from a customer's point of view. Our guides know how to make Europe come to life. We've got 35 different itineraries covering all of Europe. This is the best 3 weeks that Europe has to offer right there. That's the tour I was doing in a minibus back in the 1970s. If you're going on your own, taking somebody else's tour, or considering ours, this is the core of Europe. That's the itinerary I joined last year, and I just thought, it's the best. I've probably guided it 20 times, and last summer I just took it, and I enjoyed it as much as ever. You can never get enough of these places. It's heavy on Italy, because I think Italy is the greatest place in Europe. It's got 8 days out of 20 there in Italy. My enthusiasm is for people to go on their own, and my confidence and my excitement for all this is really stoked by the feedback I get from people actually doing it. People whose grandchildren said, I don't know, you shouldn't be doing this, you know. And they went over there without a lot of language school tips, language skills or experience or money at the time of their life and came home with money in the bank for next summer's trip. The point is, if you want to travel this way, you can. If I was making it sound easier than it is, I'd be getting people in trouble. But judging from the feedback I get, if you equip yourself with good information and expect yourself to travel smart, you can. So that's what we're about at Europe Through the Back Door up in Edmonds. Europe is better designed than ever to share its culture. They'll carve your wooden shoe. The museums are showing things off beautifully. The traditional culture survives vividly if you know where to find it. And that means getting off the beaten path, enjoying those offbeat nooks and backdoor crannies. So I'd like to thank AARP for getting us all together and wish you happy travels. Thank you.
Listen, water. You can talk fast. Wow.
That would have been better.
So, here's what we're going to do, because we found that we set up these microphones, nobody likes to get up and ask. So we just run around a la Phil Donahue into the audience, and if you have a question, raise your hand, and Rick will answer just about anything for you. There we go. See, all righty. Questions, that's great.
Rick, you always make it look so easy, but I'm wondering, what is it like for a single woman to walk up to a bench with 4 men on it and say, scoot over, let's talk and get to know each other? It just seems like I have the guts to do that, but what are they going to think of me and how's that going to go over?
Well, that's a very good comment. Women in Southern Europe have to be careful that they don't give out the wrong impression, because I find in Southern Europe, horny men chase women like dogs chase cars. And it's unacceptable in our culture, and you wouldn't find that up in Scandinavia, or in England or something like that. But in the South, people will misunderstand your intentions. If you're out at night after dark alone, you're going to cause people to misunderstand what you're out for. If you get eye contact with people, if you talk about meaningful things, if you dress in a appealing way, you might have people hustling you that you'd rather not have. It's important in the Mediterranean world to stay in the well-populated, well-lit areas and use the common sense you would use here in a big city in the United States. It's different in the South, where you have that macho society where men catcall women a lot compared to the North. But most of my staff is women. I remember when I was starting out, my minibus tours were generally all women. And I think the problem, is there's independent-minded women and independent-minded men, but the guys feel more comfortable having an adventure on their own, and the women feel more comfortable in a small group, and that's just probably wise and common sense. But from a safety point of view in Europe, there's two different issues. There's the respect, and I'm not going to put up with this kind of ogling and catcalls, and then there's physical danger. And I don't think you're doing anything risky by going to Europe on your own, and how much of the attention you get is going to be determined by where you are and what kind of signals you're sending out. Does that make sense?
You mentioned that India was one of your favorite places that you've ever traveled, just a little while ago. And I'm curious, what is it about India that you love so much to travel there, and what are some of your favorite sites there?
I love India because it wallops my ethnocentricity. Even the hippest people here are ethnocentric. And it's just so stimulating and wonderful to have people remind me that we're not the norm. When I went to India, I remember I always tell this anecdote that I'm on my way to India. I was in Afghanistan, and I was in a cafeteria where all the backpackers go, and a professor there sat down next to me, and he said, "Can I join you?" I said, "We already have." And he said, "Are you an American?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoon and forks like you do, a third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same." He had a chip on his shoulder, but he was right. I thought less of him because he ate with his fingers. And then I go to India. In fact, after that encounter, I decided I'm going to wear appropriately with my fingers and learn how to do that comfortably. And I went to fancy restaurants in southern India where there were no spoons and forks. And where well-dressed professional people would go to this restaurant, there was a big sink in the middle of the room where they would have a ceremonial kind of almost wash their hands, and then it was a beautiful thing. They'd nourish themselves using their fingers for what God intended them to be used for. It just felt right. I had to be retrained when I got home. But in India, I remember flying on airplanes where they had decal in the toilet that showed with a stick figure how not to stand over the toilet and squat, you see, because most people don't sit on something when they go to the toilet on this planet. And I remember thinking I really knew music really well, and then I went to India, and it occurred to me what I thought it was just, Indian music I didn't understand. It's just as sophisticated as our classical music, but I just didn't understand it. I can't imagine classical music with no meter and no mode, but Indian music is that way. So it humbles me. In India, time is not money. We think of how we talk about time. We bank it, we save it, we invest it, we waste it. Time is money in our culture. It's not over there, and that's a big challenge for me because I'm really efficient with my time that way. I think India has more joy than people realize, but it's kind of bulk joy, not joy per person, but there's something about bulk joy in India that is just glorious. But it's very frustrating to talk about, so I don't even like talking about India because it's a personal thing. I think one of the most frustrating things would be to take a group through India because people would be disgusted at how dirty it is or something like that. And to me, I'm just overwhelmed by the beauty in India and also the heartache of India. And there's a lot of horrible stuff about Indian culture. But I'm very careful not to judge a society when I travel. There's 1 billion Hindus that feed their cows better than their children. Now, I'm not going to judge them for that. I don't know what it's like to raise a family in a land where there's no trees and you got to use cow pies as your primary source of fuel. And why you might incorporate taking care of cows into your religion so you have some way to cook for your family. I mean, it's just beyond me. I don't know about the caste system, but when you live in a world like India, you got to have some kind of a continuity and some semblance of order, and caste is how they do it. I just want to go there and be open to it. And India is the most rewarding travel. Yeah.
Recommendations for someone who's not traveling on a tour, but for example, coming from the Northwest, going to Europe, the best route to take, like over the pole, or flying into Amsterdam versus Paris, or going to the East Coast first. Can you recommend anything?
I don't do any frequent flyer stuff because it kind of forces people to take goofy routes to get somewhere. I've got enough money where I can pay a few $100s extra just to go with the most convenient route, and I just find, for me, I just like to get to Europe on a non-stop flight. For me, I do not want to go to Minneapolis and then change. I like to go over the pole in 9 hours and get to London or Frankfurt or Paris. So from Seattle, I love that over the pole. I would tell you that I think it's been 10 years since I flew in and out of the same city. Always consider flying what travel agents call open jaws, into one city and out of another city. I just flew home from Gdansk in Poland, of all places. On my last trip, I forget where I flew in, but it was probably Edinburgh. And then I traveled all the way to Poland, and I didn't fly home from Warsaw. I flew home from Gdansk. From Gdansk, there was a flight to Copenhagen, and then a direct flight, from Gdansk to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt back to Seattle. So you don't pay any more by flying into one city than out of another city, really. You pay half the round trip and half the round trip. And then you avoid having to make the time and money consuming and needless return to your starting point. So, and an added advantage of that is that you make a smart itinerary, starting to moderate the weather, or more importantly, to moderate the culture shock. Start mild and fly home from the most exotic corner, and then your trip is constantly building. If you flew straight into Istanbul and then flew home from London, your trip would be a series of anticlimaxes. If you fly straight into England, wow, cream cheese and roundabouts are exotic, Then you go to France, then you go to Italy, then you finish things off with a flurry in Turkey, and then you fly home having peaked that way. Added advantage, it delays places most hazardous to your health until the end of your trip. Why get diarrhea early?
Can you tell us, have you ever had a time where you did something really stupid that got you really in trouble, or were you really offended someone, or?
I should think about that because people always ask me what's the biggest mistake or the funniest thing or the stupidest thing I ever did. And it doesn't, nothing, I make silly, I've been walking into the outdoor when I'm trying to go to the indoor for all my life, and I don't learn the language, which is really a big problem, so I can get completely turned around that way. Once I was on the boat from Norway to Denmark, and I drove my van onto the boat. I just finished a tour, and I was in a minibus with 8 people, and they all flew home from Bergen. I was exhausted. I drove back through Norway, got on the boat to Denmark. I went to sleep, and I slept through Denmark, and the boat was already heading back to Norway. So when I went downstairs where the cars were, there was like 200 cars in the bottom of the ferry, and mine was the only one facing the other direction. And I really felt like an idiot. I really was an idiot. That was one of it. And it cost me a whole day of my itinerary, which was a heartache for me.
Is there any place you haven't been?
Oh yeah. One of my problems is I've traveled a lot. You can imagine 4 months a year for 30 years doing this work, but now I've got all these books that I have to go back and check out. So much as I'd love to go to the Ukraine or to, where would I like to go? Sub-Saharan Africa. I've never been to Sub-Saharan Africa. I'd love to go to the Pacific Rim. I'd love to go to the South Pacific. I'd love to go to Central America. But I have this amazing situation where thousands of people are using my books, and I love it. And it's very gratifying. It kind of stokes my whole workaholism and my ego and everything. And I've got the opportunity to take my TV crew over there and make these shows. So if you gave me a free trip to Australia with the most lavish...
If you could go anywhere you want, tomorrow when you get a chance to get on a plane, go anywhere you want.
Well, that's my point. I would go back to Europe and work on my book. It's a weird thing that I am just dying to get back to Lisbon and get that thing up to date. Or Ireland. I haven't been to Ireland for a long time. And I've got co-authors that are really good. So if I've got a good co-author, I can let it slide from a, what do I owe the readers to have good quality stuff. My Ireland co-author is wonderful, Pat O'Connor, but just selfishly, I want to get back there and know what's going on in Belfast and Dublin and Douro Peninsula and all that. So it's a very odd thing to go into the Uffizi Gallery and meet people who thank me for Sicily. You know, I had nothing to do with Sicily except I made a TV show and you went there inspired by that show. But that's a very gratifying thing and I just enjoy that.
How much can the average person expect to budget and spend for a vacation to Europe, to Italy?
Yeah, I should know that answer.
You should.
I don't know that answer. You know, it depends on what you need. I mean, you have to find out what's your flight going to cost you, and that's determined by what time of year are you going. And then you've got to decide what's your mode of transportation. Are you going to stay in one spot? Are you going to rent a car and just go around Spain? Are you going to get a Eurail pass and go all over Croatian? These days, I used to get the big Eurail pass, and we used to sell a lot of those big Eurail passes, 20 countries, you know, unlimited travel for 30 days. Now people don't really buy those so much anymore. They'll buy point-to-point train tickets, they'll rent a car here, and they'll fly point-to-point around. I always get my round-trip flight from my travel agent here in Seattle, and at the same time I book the long one-way flights within Europe. So I buy these one-way flights in Europe. And I don't even go aggressive with the Ryanair and that. I just go Lufthansa or Air France or British Air. And it costs me $100 a jump in Europe on average. So, you know, I'll spend $1,000 to get to Europe and back, and they'll have 3 one-way flights within Europe. That'll cost me, on average, $100 each. And then I will do the rest of it by point-to-point train or car rental, and then you've got to figure your room and board. And basically, you know, you spend $150 a night for a double with breakfast, and then you split that with 2 people, so that's $75 a day for a roof over your head. And you can do less than that if you need to. You can stay in a youth hostel for $25 a night. Anybody here could, and you could live for the price of groceries. So that's your baseline. You stay in a $30 a night institutional kind of place, and then it usually comes with a kitchen, and you go shopping, and groceries cost essentially the same there as they do here.
Right.
But most of us are going to spend $150 a night for our room, and then we're going to spend $25 for lunch, and $25 for dinner, so $50 a day for your food, and then you add on to that your sightseeing. So, you know, it adds up. So just traveling around the United States.
So let me ask you, you've been doing this for more than 30 years. Are people more or less adventurous?
People are more sophisticated now. In the old days, it was always, if it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium, and they would do the rip through Europe this way. Now I think people they'll travel with a passion. You go to Belgium and you find beer pilgrims. A lot of Americans go to Belgium just to enjoy the beer, and it's great. You go to Vienna and you find people that are going there for their Christmas ballroom dancing season, and they do the ballroom dancing. You go to Scandinavia and you find that people are decided they're going to go hiking and camping in Scandinavia. I just think we're so much more well-traveled now that people are not going to do the once-over lightning trip. They're going to just zero right in on Ireland. And I think that's great. Are they more adventurous? I think it's harder to be adventurous now, because Europe is so well designed and organized, and to be honest, it's hard to get off the beaten path.
They scatter your ashes. Where do they scatter them?
Edmonds.
It's a good question.
Edmonds, the beach in Edmonds.
No.